Hey friends, Morgan Quaid here. Today I'm doing something a little bit different, a little bit scary, and a little bit strange for me. So I'm going to start writing a new novel to show you how I would start the process. I've had a bunch of people ask, how do you actually start when you're writing a novel? What ideas do you come up with? And how do you get going? Unlike some people, I don't have a fear of the blank page. Starting is very, very easy for me. I can start all day, every day. The problem is finishing and the middle bit and anything that even hints at being a tiny bit boring. So that's my own personal struggle, and I'm working on it. So today what I'm going to do is start from scratch with a document, show you how I set everything up, and just start writing the first few paragraphs. Now, as I've said many, many times before, you don't need to start at the beginning necessarily. And typically what I start writing doesn't end up being the first chapter of the finished novel. But I do like to start with an idea that is something that grabs people's attention and gets them interested in the story. And it also helps that it grabs my attention and keeps me interested in the story. So we're going to start with a story called Knave, or Knave, I guess. Now, I don't have a title for this other than Knave. It's going to be a fantasy story, kind of fantasy epic, but more with a murder investigation type of feel, but set in a fantasy world. Not really urban fantasy, not a lot of urban going on, but essentially it will be set in an epic fantasy world. Now, the way I usually set up the document, I obviously have the heading. I usually set up a few chapter headings as well. And I don't worry too much about what they look like. It's just that you see on the left here, I like to be able to see the chapters as they spread out ahead of me, so that as I'm writing, I can start to sort of see where everything is, and I get a good sense of the overall story. Sometimes in the chapter heading as well, I'll put a very brief description so I can remember later on as I'm writing, what was that particular thing about? All right, so Knave, what is it about? It's about a character who I haven't named and a murder investigation, but the first chapter is introducing this main character. It's a male protagonist. I'm probably going to write in third person but limited, so I'm going to be still focused on a main character throughout, so it won't sort of start in one area of the world and then zip over to another area of the world. It'll remain focused on the main character. No idea what the name is. Now, typically, I will just write P if I don't know the name. P for protagonist, because that's the way my brain works. So, P stumbles out of a tavern with a dagger in his chest. So this is literally one of two ideas that I have. So this is my start. This is all I've got. Now, I don't tend to plan ahead a lot with this sort of thing. I tend to do the planning as I'm going through. In this case, this is all I've got to introduce the character. And then the next point is after this Peter, maybe. After P stumbles out of the tavern with a dagger in his chest, he then makes his way to, let's say, Meredith. Place. So in this world, Meredith is a female character that I've got in mind who's a kind of apothecary, healer type person. So I might put that there. Now, interestingly, as I've always said, first drafts are meant to be messy and rough, and you're sort of working through details as you go. This will be incredibly rough, and you will see just how terrible a speller I am. And a grammarian, if that is indeed a word. You'll see how bad I am and all that sort of stuff, because first drafts are terrible, and that's fine. By design, that's the way it works. Through the editing process, you get better and better at making them gooder, you know what I mean, refining the language and fixing spelling, and then you obviously get editors involved and all that sort of stuff, so you turn it from a pretty ordinary idea that's very roughshod into a fantastic, well-polished novel. All right, so First idea. P stumbles out of a cat. I've got to think of a name. I can't call him P. All right, we're going to call him... I want to go with Kane, but I don't like Kane when the story is called Knave. Too many Ks. I don't want to... Kevin? No. Fantasy World Kevin. Let's go. We're just going to go with Kane. I'm going to go with Kane anyway, and I'll change the title. The whole the central premise of this idea, the only premise I've got so far, is that Kane is kind of a rogue type figure, a bit down on his luck, but also not particularly savory and not particularly trustworthy, but very, very good at a certain skill set, which is investigating crimes. Partly because he's deep in the criminal underbelly of the city that I haven't invented yet, whatever city this is. So we will start with something to grab people's attention. Now, I always like to start with the character as quickly as possible, rather than the setting and the surroundings and all that. So I wouldn't start with, rain drizzled from the sky, unless that rain was directly hitting Kane on the head or something, so that you quickly get into the character description, rather than it just being scenery without a character. So get to the character as quickly as possible. This one, though, I'm starting with a bit of a punch. So what am I writing? So it's something about the dagger, him looking down at the dagger. Isn't this exciting? We're writing and thinking and talking to camera at the same time. This could be very, very bad. Yep. Sorry, the way I was going to spell wound there was very... wound. No, it's not how you spell that. Or anything. All right, so he stumbles forward, staring dumbly at the hilt now protruding from his chest. Yeah, that's rough. But anyway, first draft. Blood wells at the edges of the wound, dripping down his torn shirt. Each movement, I'm wanting to say when he's moving forward, every kind of movement hurts, stings, because he's got this piece of metal in him. Stab. Of course it's stab, it's a knife. Shock of pain. His legs. Not stumbling. See, this is one of the issues that you have. I'm already self-editing too much because it's to camera, obviously. Normally, I would just be pushing through this a little bit quicker, but I'm already trying to make it sound better than it normally would for you guys. So thanks for the pressure. But anyway, I'll just keep moving. Again, first draft. The job of a first draft is to get done, not to be perfect. And this will be so far from perfect. Anyway, so he stumbles forward, staring dumbly at the hilt now protruding from his chest. Protruding is a word I use way too much. I would change that in an edit, but anyway. Blood wells at the edges of the wound, dripping down on his torn shirt, each movement bringing a shock of pain. His legs... numb, dragging in the dirt. Okay, so the reason why I didn't leave it on pain is because I'm going to introduce his name next. So Kane, because you don't want to have pain and Kane too close together. Just some of those similarities work really well with the human ear. Some of them just sound silly, and pain and Kane, it's not going to work. Kane looks about, vision blurred as he stumbles forward. Rain. Why is it raining? Why not? It's that kind of mood. It's gritty, it's dirt. There's got to be mud on his boots and all that sort of stuff. Vision blurred as he stumbles. Oh, hang on. Okay, so a lot of what I write in first person present, actually. So I have just gone to first person without realizing it. So we're going to drop that back to third person, which is what I initially intended. So he stumbled forward, staring dumbly at the hilt now protruding from his chest. Blood welled at the edges of the wound, dripping down his torn shirt, each movement bringing a shock of pain, his legs numb, dragging in the dirt. Pain! Kane looked about, vision blurred as he stumbled forward. Rain drove heavily from a not brooding from a dark. It's not brooding because it's already happening. Clouds. Angry. Now, most editors will say, don't go too heavy with the adverbs and the adjectives and all that sort of stuff. My first draft will be full of them, but that's, again, fine. Remember, the job of a first draft is to be done, not to be amazing. The amazing comes later. All right. Drove heavily from angry storm clouds. Rain drove heavily from... that sounds clunky, but anyway, from storm clouds. Turning hard-packed earth into mud. Not mud. Into a slippery... I'm going to say it's a precarious. Again, terrible, but we will keep going into a precarious marshland where each new step threatened, I'm wanting to say spilling onto the ground, threatened, oh man, this is very, very rough. Just the pressure of having a camera on me. Always staring. All right, so he stumbles forward, then staring. Storm clouds. Okay, so who has jammed the dagger in? You're not going to see them in this first scene. He is going to stumble, stumble, stumble. This is a perfect example of I'm not sure of the next little bit to do. So I'm just going to skip ahead because this is first draft and I need to get to the point where he's at Meredith's door. So I'm just going to completely skip the next bit and go straight to he's wondering about who has stabbed him because he's very, very inebriated. I'll put that there as a reminder. And I'm going to skip him walking through this little town to get to Meredith's house and to the point where he's at the door. Incidentally, one thing that I do that I didn't do, but I normally do, is I split the screen. The reason I do that is because I can just keep writing and that little panel will stay at eye level the whole time. So I can just keep focusing and keep going. It's a slightly different way of viewing what you're writing, but once you get used to it, it just means you can keep going and going and going, and you're not... I don't like that, you know, you scroll down and you have to scroll back up again, and this way it just keeps going. There's a little tip for you, a trick that I picked up from somewhere. I do not know where. All right, so Kane's fist thumped against the hard wood. Blood stains. Washed away by the pouring rain. Gee, that's terrible. As quickly I'm wanting to say that he slumps down. You kind of get him to that point where it's like, well, he's done, he's out. Get him near death before he can talk to Meredith, the apothecary. I hope this is super thrilling for you to watch me struggle with how to just put sentences together. But honestly, this is the majority of it. Once you've got the ideas, it tends to flow a lot quicker. But sometimes at the early stages, it can be a little bit, sort of backwards and forwards. Also, I have put no thought into this whatsoever. So I haven't planned, I haven't done any outlining, which again is why I say, particularly for your first book, outline people. Even if it's a rough outline, you need something to sort of say, I'm doing this and then moving here, and then what are the main kind of movements and themes of the story. I've literally got, one or two ideas and I'm just sort of going with it, which is usually how I go anyway. But anyway, enough excuses, Morgan, get on with it. All right, his vision narrowed to a single point. Darkness looming from all around as he slumped against the doorway, his legs buckling beneath the strain of his own body. And this is where I would typically put a little bit of internal monologue to kind of show you a bit more about what he's thinking, where he's at, and it also kind of highlights and pinpoints the hopelessness of the situation before we get to the resolution. This is it, he thought. An end. Oh, I still don't know enough about this character to know what he would say and what his voice is and how he would talk. He's a rougher kind of guy, so it might be interesting to just go, finally, like he's almost longing for this thing to end. He thought, an end to the madness. Madness, all right, an end to the madness. Kane closed his eyes. All the strength flowing from his body, as though carried by the water. Muddy ground below. That's a lot of words to say something simple, but anyway, I'm feeling a little verbose, so let's do that. All right, so we're getting desperate, carried through the water, falling from the heavens into the muddy ground below. So he closes his eyes. Darkness swallowed him as whispers began to rise from the shadows. A familiar dread dawning. See, I'm hinting at something here that we're going to explore later on. But what I'm hinting at is that death is not the end for this guy, and he doesn't quite know that yet. He knows that there's some things that have been haunting him throughout his life, but there is a supernatural entity that has an interest in this guy despite his lowly station. So he's not going to be able to just die normally, but we get into that later on. So darkness swallowing, all this sort of stuff, and then Meredith grabs him. So the world tipped sharply to one side as he fell as Kane's body slipped doorway, landing a wet thud against the floor. Numbly, he felt rough hands pull at his shirt, dragging him bodily into the apothecary's house. Is it a house? I don't know. What would you call it? Place. Yeah, we'll just call it house for the time. I'll come back later. I'll think of an awesome, cool word for apothecary's thing. Dragging him bodily into the apothecary's house. Okay, and this is where I would probably put something like okay, so this is a note to me to say when I come back to this, that's the next thing that I'm going to write. So as he wakes up, he'll see Meredith. So we don't see Meredith because he can't. Remember, we're kind of seeing through his eyes. We don't see her until he's woken, which will be potentially a day or so later, once he's started healing. And he'll see Meredith, and Meredith will, do the usual, what have you been doing, running around getting knives stuck in you, you silly man. And she will, of course, heal him. And that's when you start to get a sense of their relationship. I still don't know with the Meredith character what she's going to be like, and whether there's a romance angle between the two, or a history between the two, or whether she's older and more like a motherly figure, or whether she's just someone that hates him for some reason, or doesn't. I don't know. But I like the idea of conflict. I like the idea of her begrudgingly healing this guy. And this also not being the first time this has happened. This is a fairly regular occurrence. After this, the next thing that would be happening is the announcement of a death. So this whole thing is predicated on a royal dies, probably a young, very well thought of royal, maybe the princess or something. And it needs to be investigated, but the ruling elite do not trust anyone within their own circles. So they go to this guy, they go to Kane and say, your job is to find out who did this. So that's kind of as the story goes on. But this is, maybe a couple of hundred words. Let's have a look. Well, that doesn't count. Yeah, a couple of hundred words. And you can see there are sections here that I'm going to go back to, and I would do that as part of an edit from the very beginning, and then I would sharpen some of the words as well, all that sort of stuff. But you can see how I just skip sections where I'm getting stuck, or sections where I'm just not sure how I'm going to do that yet. I don't worry too much about the word choices and those sorts of things. As you've seen, I wasn't very happy with most of this stuff, but the ideas I like, and some of the imagery is really cool. I just need to work on the final version, but that'll come much later. And as you've seen, I'll skip ahead where I need to. I'll write notes before I go to the next section. So once I get to the end of my writing stint for the day, my brain's starting to get a little bit clunkier, and I'm not writing smoothly. That's usually when I'll stop, and I'll write a note like I've just written here to sort of say, next steps for me when I come back to writing tomorrow is to deal with this section. I'll also think about it throughout the day and overnight, and then sort of come back and I might change this, but at least it gives me something to look at next time when I start writing. So I don't know if that's been helpful. I hope it's been helpful. Feel free to leave comments in the comments section. Subscribe, like, tell your friends, eat healthy. I don't know, whatever. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it inspires you to get out there and write that novel, or write that short story or novella or whatever it is, screenplay. Thanks for joining me. And remember, keep it real, keep it safe. Thanks for joining me. And